Up next, a brief conversation on Bill O'Reilly and his ousting at Fox News with Professor Matt Sienkiewicz of Boston College. Professor Sienkiewicz, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Hey, Ben.
Do me a favor, lean in a little bit more into that microphone.
How's that?
Oh, that's even better. That's
Excellent.
even better.
Yeah.
You know, we're making a hard shift here from Syria.
Well, yes, but we're both talking about broken systems.
Yeah,
We're talking about aspects of American politics and culture that don't work, right?
Yeah.
The way that we have structured media, I think, is a problem.
Yeah.
It's not at the same level, of course, as this regime change question, but what we see here at Fox News is certainly, it goes back to sort of presumptions built into American society and the way we understand the world that lead us into problematic places like, this sort of purely commercial-driven system of news, which has a real political impact, right?
Yeah.
It can impact who becomes president, and that can be so commercially oriented that we can have somebody like Bill O'Reilly lasting through all these
lasting through everything that he did to help get us into Iraq.
Sure.
Lasting through all that he's done, all that he said, all of the dog whistles, all of the
sometimes just direct racism.
Direct racism, all of the soft white supremacy, and sometimes outright white supremacy.
Sometimes direct
I mean,
calls for
it's all of the things that he's done. It took us to get to this point to actually see his career end. Yeah. And you know, I saw somebody online. You know, I try to stay offline now, but someone's saying that we shouldn't celebrate the demise of his career. But I disagree. He's been such a huge contributing factor to a lot of the problems being unresolved. Like I said at the beginning, like some people make their careers off of stunting the discussion when they know they know. I'm not on my show, so I can't really. I wanted to cuss there because Bill O'Reilly has been just integral in stopping progress. So why should we mourn the end of a career of a person who's intentionally put there to undermine any progress?
Well, we shouldn't mourn for two reasons. One, I'm not sure this career is over. Right there, he certainly got to a point where the Murdochs decided that the scales tipped. Right, that does not mean he's not commercially viable. Right, the American media system has been, especially in the news sector, has been increasingly based on dividing up audiences. Right, getting a tighter and tighter grip on a smaller and smaller audience. Right, he can downshift from Fox News and find an audience somewhere. Yeah. So that's the first thing, right? There's no reason to believe this guy's gone away.
I want to stop you there. Don't speak anything too positive. Like we want him to go away.
Oh no, we want him to go away. There's no question about it. But
realistically,
it's the scariest thing about it is that this is not a death sentence for him in terms of his career. Secondly, we really shouldn't celebrate it insofar as this decision to oust him had nothing to do with ethics, nothing to do with journalism, nothing to do with morality. Right, it just had to do with competing notions of capital, basically. Yeah. Right, the Murdoch sons, James and Lachlan, they decided they were more interested in sort of appearing presentable, perhaps. Right, they were trying to get rid of him because in the long run they thought it was sort of bad for business. Right.
Well, actually, in the short run. Right, in the short run, right, they lost, I believe, almost 60 sponsors, and even
from the show.
From the show, right.
It's true that at this point they had just shifted their money over into other shows, and you can't be certain they wouldn't have drifted back, for sure. I mean, there's sort of this competing, the long-term brand element of it versus, Rupert's just counting the money, right? The dad who's, it turned out that ultimately I think that both sides decided that this was bad, right? There was a short-term loss in terms of potential sponsorship and a long-term loss, but that's because, James and Lachlan are not ashamed of his racism. Right. They're not ashamed of his verbal misogyny, right? The things that he says in the air. They're not afraid of his pretty overt white nationalism. In terms of, he talks about the demise of the white power world. Scary stuff, right? That's not a problem. Right. That wasn't going to mess them up.
So you're pointing out a lot of things here that I think we need to double back on and unpack. Right. So he's only being put out not even because of $13 million.
Oh, that's nothing.
They show that they're willing to stand behind him.
Yeah.
Right. They will stand behind him even $13 million above what they already pay him. Sure. So they have no problem with his misogyny, no problem with the allegations. They only have a problem with the fact that this is a huge PR thing from the right now, and that it's financially inconvenient for that time slot, and maybe they can find some other ways to make. So I like what you said. It's like it's competing capital frameworks, right? Yeah. Of why he would go. The only other question that I would have then is where does Fox go from here? right? Because their brand is not really sullied, but they're
it's the brand. I mean, the brand seems hard to sully after Roger Ailes.
Exactly.
And the fact that the ratings were still good this week, despite all that. That said, this is like Disney firing Mickey Mouse, right? Not to
Exactly.
not to cast aspersions on Mickey, right? But you know, this has been he's the flagship, right? He is the face of it. There was a lot of talk. Oh, what's going to happen when Ailes leaves? Well, the reality is Ailes is replaceable, right? The behind-the-scenes types can be replaced. This isn't to say they can't develop a new personality, but it's awfully telling that they haven't, since 1996, really developed a second personality on the level. There's Hannity, who I do not think has the same breadth of appeal.
Right.
I mean, it's telling, right?
Well, so what's appealing, and this is something that I really have tracked with Bill O'Reilly for a long time. What's appealing about Bill O'Reilly is that he's able to sneak in the messages of white supremacy, racism, sexism, uber nationalism, and he's able to sneak it in a nice and moderately dignified fashion. Right, he looks, you know, to people who would watch him. Right, they may be easily impressed by his demeanor, his presentation, and all the while he's quite literally saying the same things that you would get out of a Richard Spencer. I remember when he was talking to John McCain back in 2007, and he said that America was built by, America is run by white Christian men. Right. And immediately after that, he began to lament the browning of America, right? So he sneaks in white genocide, but in a nice, dignified fashion, and speaking to, you know, a candidate who was running for president at the time. So here is his appeal. The question is, can Fox News actually find someone else who can cross that threshold of seamlessly going back and forth between being a dog whistle, outright racist, sexist, misogynist, and simultaneously doing it with his $2,000 suit on?
No, it's tough, right? And the key to Fox News has been, for the most part, looking like a legitimate news outlet, right? Giving the trappings, having the graphic package, and the Bill O'Reilly type, you know, sort of visually reminds you of a classic newsman, something along these lines, but incorporating that into the sort of you know, crazy regressive politics that they have. You know, there's nobody on that channel at the moment. I mean, I think they're moving Tucker Carlson, who does not have the same
heat pales in comparison.
I mean, it's worth noting though that this guy's 67 years old, O'Reilly, and it's hard to imagine a younger character taking up that position.
It's not for me.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm being optimistic. I'm not saying they can't be awful in a different way.
Yeah.
But the sort of, I mean, you know, I hate sort of the sort of throwing Mad Men as a term, right? It's, But that sort of blind misogynistic patriarchy. It's very hard to pull that off if you're a little bit younger. It doesn't mean you can't find other ways to be awful.
That's interesting.
But the obliviousness that O'Reilly has is something about his generation.
I want to play this brief clip of one of my favorite clips of Bill O'Reilly, and I say that obviously tongue-in-cheek. Let's listen into this real quick.
How are you going to get jobs for them? Many of them are ill-educated and have tattoos on their foreheads, and you know, how are you going to, and I hate to be generalized about it, but it's true. If you look at all the educational statistics, how are you going to give jobs to people who aren't qualified for jobs?
So we didn't get a context for it, but he's talking about African Americans. And he's talking about the fact that underneath President Obama, African Americans did poorly, et cetera, et cetera. And then he comes in with this, well, I don't want to overgeneralize, but you just overgeneralize in one of the most racist fashions possible. This is the art form that Bill O'Reilly specializes in. And, you know, for anyone who's lamenting his career demise, you know, I have nothing to say.
Absolutely. The only thing to lament here is the fact that this is where our sort of journalistic, I call them journalists might be a bit much, but our sort of public affairs system has taken us. Yeah. Right. The utter unfettered nature of it, and it has brought us to here where we have. I mean, this is it's pure ideological sort of charlatanism, right? I mean, there's no content there, but it feels good, it looks good. And we don't have much. We're getting there. This show, right? There are alternatives that are developing, right? But the fact is, the sort of main thrust of American news and public affairs is about finding an audience, small but not too small, and pumping them with what they already think. And you know, there are other systems out there, and this is the system that we're in. Hopefully, you know, some of the new forms of communication are going to help us not get further into it. But you know, that's where he's at.
Well, that's Bill O'Reilly. Professor Matt Sienkiewicz, Boston College, professor of media studies. You've been on my show quite a few times. I'm so glad that you could join me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.